Hello, my name is John with DATSIFACT Narrative Writing, and in this video we will be coding, which is just a fancy word for analyzing a story for its parts and seeing what kind of DATSIFACT elements we can find. And coding is where I begin with students because it helps them recognize and learn the DATSIFACT elements, but also they can start to see patterns that published authors use in their own writing, which is very beneficial for struggling young writers. This is part 1 of 2 for Coding Magic Treehouse book number 6. If you're looking for part 2, you can click on the link right here, or you can click on the link in the description below. I use Magic Treehouse books because the author, Mary Pope Osborne, does a lot of the same stuff that I want my students to do. They're also very popular with many young readers, so young readers more than often will be familiar with the stories, so they can pick up and they already know the characters, and it makes the transition to writing so much easier. And also, if they can start to emulate Mary Pope Osborne and the way she writes, they will quickly become much better writers. Now I'm using Magic Treehouse book number 6. I'm using an excerpt from it, so we're going to start with chapter 4, and we'll cover pages 18 through 21. Okay, alright, so let's get to it. This is Afternoon on the Amazon by Mary Pope Osborne. These books are written again for first grade readers, but if you're a 4th, 5th grade writer, this is a lot like you should be writing. And Mary Pope Osborne, the author, structures the writing kind of the way a lot of writers do, and this seems to be something that students can pick up on the way she writes, so that's precisely why I use these books. Okay, we are again using Magic Treehouse book number 6. The excerpt is from chapters 4, which is pages 18 through 21. And if you'll notice down in the bottom right hand corner of both page 19 and on 21, you'll see a bolded area that is set off. And what that is that in these books, Jack reads from books as well. And so this is an excerpt from the book that Jack reads in the Magic Treehouse books. We will not be coding for this, primarily because student writers don't write this way. They don't have their characters and their stories read from books. And so really, there's really no need to code for that at all. So we will be skipping over that. Okay, again, coding is just is just analyzing the story for the DATSIFACT elements. And so we'll go ahead and go in order. The first 5 elements, the DATSI elements, dialogue, actions, thoughts and feelings, setting, and imagery, we code with highlighters. If you put your highlighters in alphabetical order, the blue one comes up first. So let's go ahead and code for the dialogue using the blue highlighter. Now again, with dialogue, we're looking really for quotation marks because you have direct quotes and indirect quotes. And I know from experience that Mary Pope Osborne uses direct quotes, so that's really all I'm looking for. And again, I'm not going to highlight the attribution part, the he said or the she said part. I'm going to do that in green, even though when you're writing or you're drafting, you don't actually write that on the DATSIFACT template at all. Okay, so I've done this a few times. I'm going to move a little more quickly. There's nothing over here. Again, I'm just looking for quotation marks. I'm going to skip the excerpt part, move on to the second part of it, and we're moving right along. You might be wondering why I do this, but I mean, if you go ahead and pause the video before we start it and actually follow along and stuff like that, then you'll kind of understand that this part's pretty easy. There's nothing over here, and here we go. Okay, if you'll notice on the second or the second 2 pages, 20 and 21, there's quite a bit of dialogue. If you look on the first page, there's just a little bit of dialogue. Okay, all right, we are done coding for dialogue. Let's move on to coding for actions, which involves the green highlighter. Again, when you're coding for actions, you're also coding for non-actions, like Jack didn't move. He kept staring down at the forest floor. Now, actions are fairly simple because most of everything is going to be an action. The only thing to really worry about is don't forget the mental actions, like he remembered something, she thought about something. if it's not a thought and feeling. I mean, that gets a little bit tricky. But the trickiest part is right here. Jack took a deep breath. That is an action, but it shows a feeling. So we're going to leave that alone. We have to keep going. He thought. That's a thought. That's a continuation of the thought. Here's the attribution. Jack called. And again, I can move through this a little more quickly because I've already done this quite a few times. Okay, over here, only a few rays of light slanted through the gloom. That's describing the setting, as is this paragraph. The trees were very, very tall and wide. All these sentences right here in this paragraph, that is setting. So we move on. Said Jack, pulled out the rainforest book. He found a picture. He read. Again, we're going to leave the excerpt from the book that he read alone. Move on to the next part. Said Jack. Oh, I can't get this part. There we go. He closed the book, looked around. He peered around the forest. Jack felt unseen, so that's a feeling. Jack said. And he said. She headed off through the gloom. So I'm going to go ahead and move through this quickly and kind of be quiet. That way I can kind of speed it up. Okay, all right, and that finishes up for coding the actions. I did make a little mistake right here. The weird noise grew louder and louder. That's describing the noise, so that's an imagery thing. These are some thoughts up here. Was it an animal? Sound got louder is an imagery thing. Sounded like a person walking over leaves is an imagery thing. And he has a feeling up here. Okay, but for the most part, I mean, look at it. A majority, 80–90% of it is action and dialogue. If you look at the other page, it's kind of the same way. I mean, the majority of any story is going to be action and dialogue. Okay, with that done, we can throw away our green highlighter, grab our orange highlighter, and we're looking for thoughts and actions. If you'll notice, there's not a whole lot that's coded for, so it shouldn't be too hard. I'm sorry, I think I said thoughts and actions. I mean thoughts and feelings, of course. So Jack took a deep breath. That's an action that shows a feeling, so it gets orange. We have to keep going, he thought, is orange. We have to find the special thing for Morgan is a continuation of that thought. Over here we have setting because we're describing the light and the trees and everything. We're leaving the excerpt alone. Look on the next page. Jack felt unseen eyes. That's definitely a feeling. Sounded like a person is imagery. Sound got louder is imagery. Was it an animal, a bug? These are all thoughts. And then the weird noise grew louder and louder is imagery. And again, we're leaving the excerpt alone. Okay? So that wasn't terribly bad. Actually, let me go ahead and... I'm a perfectionist in some degree, so let me do a better job right there. Okay? All right. Few thoughts, few feelings, and we're done with that. And then we can move on to setting. Now again, setting is the time and place in which something occurs. For the most part, authors only really focus on the place. And so describing the few rays of light, and the author describes, the trees and the vines and all that stuff. Again, we're leaving the excerpt alone. That's a sound, that's a sound, and that's a sound, and those are all imagery. So really the only good description, or the description of the place, is kind of concentrated in a paragraph, which is kind of the way I teach it as well. So we're done with that. And we can move on to the imagery. Now again, the imagery are the sounds, the smells, the tastes, and the touch, or how something feels in a story. It's the five senses without what we see. And so everything here on the first page is already coded for, except the excerpt, which we're ignoring. So on the second page, if you look up here on the top of 21, sounded like a person walking over leaves. That describes the sound. Sound got louder. The weird noise grew louder and louder. So those are all imagery. You can consider them actions. I don't really care. coding for it is not the same as writing it in a story. So the students are going to understand it when they draft a story and when they fill out a DATSIFACT template, where it goes, whether it's imagery or action or setting or whatever. As you're coding for it, as long as you understand that we're talking about sounds, that's okay. I'm not really worried about that part. Okay, but if you look at it, everything is coded for, which is kind of amazing. Again, except for the excerpts from the book that Jack reads in the Magic Treehouse books. But I mean, look at it. It's mostly green and blue. There's a smattering of yellow and orange, which is nice here on the second pages, or the 20 and 21 pages. If you go to the front, again, it's mostly green and blue. Over here in the first area, you have a couple of thoughts. And then notice that the setting, the description of the setting, is concentrated in a paragraph or two, which is how a lot of authors do it. And okay, I think we're done with the coding for the DATSIT elements. When you go to video 2 of coding Magic Treehouse book number 6, you'll notice how, or you'll see how I code for the fact elements, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. Okay, all right. Now that we're done with coding for DATSA part of DATSIFACT, we can end this video and move on to the part 2. Again, the link is right here, or you can look in the description below, and we hope to see you there. Thanks.